since you put this lake in.
What do you catch mostly?
Walleye, crappie, catfish.
Every day.
Just about every day, catch something.
You like to fish?
Love to fish.
A lot of people in Iowa and these pelicans on Iowa's Black Hawk Lake have one very important thing in common. They both spend a lot of time fishing. Iowa has a variety of fishing waters, everything from small streams and farm ponds to large man-made lakes. Some of our larger rivers, like the Des Moines, produce good fish populations. Some of our most beautiful waters are the natural lakes like Black Hawk Lake in Sac County. Most of Iowa's natural lakes are in the northwest and north-central part of the state, where they were formed thousands of years ago by glaciers. The scouring action of the ice cut out the lake basins, and when the glaciers retreated, the basins filled with meltwater. Most of our natural lakes are fairly shallow now because they've silted in rather heavily. Although silting does take place naturally, Iowa's lakes are filling much faster now because our cultivated land erodes more quickly than the natural prairie that once surrounded them. Since they are shallow, most of Iowa's lakes also get quite warm in the summer months. Water temperature and depth largely determine what kind of fish inhabit our waters. Iowa's most popular game fish, bass, walleye, catfish, and crappies, are well suited to survive our high summer water temperatures. Except for a limited trout program in northeast Iowa, fish hatcheries operated by the Conservation Commission in Iowa are concerned with raising warm water game fish. The state fish hatchery at Rathbun Reservoir on the Sheraton River is the newest and largest in the state. Rathbun Reservoir is one of Iowa's large man-made lakes. It was built as a flood control project. Rathbun Hatchery is a unique warm water facility. It was opened in 1977. Most warm water hatcheries in the United States use large earth-bottom ponds to raise fish, but all fish holding facilities at Rathbun are made of concrete. Water which is drawn in from Rathbun Lake is continually circulated in each tank. The concrete facilities and the continuous supply of fresh water make it possible to raise more fish in less area than in earthen facilities. Another advantage is that the concrete tanks can be kept cleaner than earthen ones, and this allows greater control of the parasites and disease organisms that are a constant problem in fish hatcheries. Rathbun Hatchery is conveniently located below Rathbun Dam, so that water for the hatchery is drawn directly from the lake by a large pipe in the dam. Water coming into the hatchery is continuously monitored electronically. Water volume, temperature, and dissolved oxygen content are easily checked from inside the facility. Water temperature has a major effect on fish growth. Dissolved oxygen is also vital to fish. In the summer months, there's usually very little or no dissolved oxygen in the deeper parts of Rathbun Lake. Since the inflow pipe for the hatchery is deep in the lake, the water must be aerated during the summer. Rathbun Hatchery is primarily involved in walleye and channel catfish production. Early spring is a busy time at the hatchery. The yearly fish hatching programs usually begin in March. Generally, by mid-March, the water temperature in Lake Rathbun has warmed to about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. At about this time, adult walleyes in the lake begin to move into shore to spawn. The preferred sites for egg laying are the rocky areas along the dam site. At this time each year, Conservation Commission personnel use gill nets to collect some of the adult walleyes. Nets are set in the early evening and fish are collected from them after several hours. Then the nets are reset for another catch later the same night. A gill net is a stationary net that catches fish of a certain size as they swim into it. The mesh catches and holds the fish around the gill covers. Gill nets have to be tended within a few hours to prevent injury to the walleyes.
I'll head the nose into quite a ways from shore. You see where that fish is at? You hold us there, and then I'll get the rear end.
The 2 net hauls per night provide conservation workers with a cold, wet job that goes on, weather permitting, every night for about a month from mid-March to mid-April. Sometimes the weather just doesn't permit. Lake Rathbun can get pretty rough, and like the night we went out, spring winds at night can make working out of a small john boat troublesome, to say the least.
Now this fish I'm going to throw back, because she's a fin clip fish. She's been through the hatchery once.
Okay.
See the clip?
The walleyes are quickly and carefully removed from the nets. Those to be used are placed in holding tanks in the boats to be taken back to the hatchery in large tank trucks. Vern Spikerman, Rathbun hatchery manager, is directly involved in every aspect of the walleye program.
It seems to me last year we went through about 1,200 fish to get 310 quarts, so we'll probably have to go through 1,500 to 2,000 walleyes to get our 400 quarts of eggs. The problem is that so many of your females you bring in are green, and a lot of them never ripen.
Never do ripen.
No, and what we do is, like this fish is green, we'll hold her for about 5 days or so. If she doesn't ripen up by then, we'll haul her back to lake.
About how many do you catch a night?
When the run's really going, 150 or so a night.
And you hold them for about 5 days, and then you put them right back in the lake?
Yeah, everything goes back to lake. The fish that we strip, we let them rest for about a day, we haul them back too.
Do you ever recatch any that you've caught before?
Yeah, a few.
Do you mark them so you know? Or
No, but they are, a research branch is marking all the fish that are going through the hatchery this year for the population estimate. They were trying to make a population estimate on the walleyes.
Here at the hatchery, newly caught walleyes are being sorted into tanks by sex. Females are examined daily until they are ready to spawn.
These are all fish females that came in from the nets green. In other words, they weren't ready, they haven't ovulated yet. And we've held them in here, and we go through them each day waiting for them, and then waiting for them to ovulate so that we can take the eggs from them. We have to go through each day and check them.
these are just females then?
Right.
Where do you keep the males?
They're down at the other, and then in separate tanks.
Spikerman sorts the fish by pushing them all to one end of the tank. Then he catches a few at a time in a net and examines them by hand.
Vern, how can you tell whether they're gravid or not?
Well, you see, this is a genital pore right there. If they're ready to get their eggs, you just gently press on here and the eggs will flow freely. You see this? Nothing coming.
Vern, about how old are most of these fish?
I don't really know. I suppose this fish here is probably 5 years old.
What's the largest one you've gotten out of the lake about?
About 10 pounds. I think the females probably average about 7 pounds.
Each day, those females and males that are ready are stripped of eggs and sperm. The process of fertilizing the eggs in the hatchery is a far cry from what happens in nature.
I've got a right female that we selected out of those other females just before. Now I'm going to try and keep all the water off of the eggs that I can for two reasons. As soon as the egg hits the water, it starts taking on water and swells. And when it swells, there's a little hole in the egg through which the sperm must enter to fertilize it. And as soon as it starts swelling, this little micropore will close off and sperm can't get in to fertilize it. So that's why I try and keep it as dry as possible. You see how ready the fish is to spawn. The eggs virtually run out of the fish. I'll go ahead and add another female to this pan. Try not to drop them. When you're holding them, you have to hold your finger over the genital pore, otherwise the eggs will run out all over the floor. Makes it kind of tough to hang on to them once in a while.
Do they spawn all at once when they do it naturally, or do they?
I've never seen it done, but I expect they do, yeah. Now I got a male fish.
What's the difference in the male?
Well, usually smaller. And of course, he doesn't have a big abdomen full of eggs like the female does. They're not hard to tell. And if you just push on it, the sperm will flow freely from the fish. This is a big male fish here, right here. I'll add just a little more from another. I add just a little more from another male just to make sure that that male, you know, if you happen to have a bad male, these males we hold and use more than once. We mix the sperm and eggs together right now, and then hopefully we haven't got too much water in there. Then we'll go ahead and add a little bit of water, and this will activate the sperm. The sperm really isn't activated until it gets in the water also. We add a little bit of water, and then sperms will fertilize the egg within 2 or 3 minutes. Within 2 or 3 minutes, the egg will have taken on enough water so it'll be pretty much swelled shut and won't be able to, the micropore will be closed. And then we mix the eggs. We put the eggs into this clay solution, and this is the clay coats each one of the eggs and removes the adhesive substance that was on the eggs before. And when eggs are naturally deposited, they're real adhesive, and they stick to rocks and things on the shoreline. We don't want this because of the way we incubate them in the jars, where each egg has to be free so that they can be oxygenated.
One of your major problems is with fungus getting...
Right, if you don't get the eggs clayed good, they'll stick together and you'll get clumps of eggs in the jar. And then the inner eggs and these clumps, the inner eggs won't get any oxygen, and they'll die, and then the fungus starts growing on the dead eggs, and then it'll spread to your live eggs.
After they've been mixed with the clay, the eggs have to harden overnight in water. They are poured into fine mesh screen trays that are suspended in water tanks. The clay settles out of the egg mass, through the screen and to the bottom of the tank. After they've hardened, Spikerman dips the eggs into hatching jars.
Do you have any idea how many of them you put in one of those jars?
Yeah, we put 2 quarts per jar, and we sample count. We have a chart developed. You count the number of eggs in a straight line in 3 inches, and then there's a conversion chart that tells you how many eggs per quart there is. We put 2 quarts per jar, then we sample count the eggs, and they run between 120, 130,000 eggs per quart. So there's about 250,000 eggs in each jar.
Banks of these jars are attached to a large incubator. The whole unit continuously circulates water over the eggs. This provides adequate oxygen for the eggs and helps prevent fungus from growing on them.
These are our incubators. Of course, the eggs are in the jar, and there's water continually running down the tube in the middle of the jar and flowing up from the bottom, and it continually rolls your eggs, as you can see. The eggs will hatch depending on the water temperature. The warmer the water temperature, the faster they'll hatch, but they'll hatch in from 14 to 18 days.
By the time the eggs are ready to hatch, the egg mass is dark colored. The rolling mass looks almost black because of the dark fish eyes in the eggs. When the eggs hatch, the larval fish, or fry as they're called, swim with the water current to the top of the jars. At the top, the current carries them through a pipe and into a trough which collects all the fry from a set of jars. The fry then flow down through a large drain at the end of the trough and finally into a holding tank.
What do you do with them when they hatch?
Fry get stocked out as 1 or 2 day old fish, primarily because the walleye fry are very cannibalistic, and it's difficult to rear them without having a lot of natural feed and plankton available for them to feed on. So we just get them out of here and stock them right in the lakes.
Where do most of them go?
Most of them go to our large Iowa lakes and reservoirs. For instance, from Rathman here, we'll be stocking Rathman Reservoir, and I think Coralville Reservoir and Lake McBride there up near Iowa City, and then Red Rock.
Is there very much natural spawning in the lake?
Obviously, there's eggs deposited in lakes because we're catching them when they're spawning. But I think the percent hatch would be next to nothing.
How about other lakes in Iowa?
Same thing. You'd never maintain a fishery with natural reproduction on it.
If you put them out in the fry stage, there must be a heavy mortality.
Yeah, there is. I would just guessing, I suppose, if you had 1% survival, you'd probably be doing good. But of course, we tend to compensate for this by stocking large numbers. We stock walleye fry at the rate of 3,000 per acre, and then, well, that's in our natural lakes. In the reservoirs, in our larger reservoirs, we cut this down to 1,000 per acre simply because it would take away almost all our production just to stock some of these reservoirs. We're limited by our incubator size to about 35 million fry per year. That's with about a 65 to 70% hatch, what we normally run.
What does a walleye fry begin to eat?
By the first 3 days, they're living on their yolk sac. They're stored reservoir food. And once that's absorbed, then they start right in on what we call plankton. Then as they get larger, they'll gradually switch to insects and fish.
Vern, can I ask you how you got into this work yourself?
I don't really know. I got a bachelor's and a master's degree in fish and wildlife at Iowa State, and then I got a master's degree in fisheries. And then, I don't know, like anybody else in this field, you take any job that comes along. But I really was interested in hatchery work. I don't know, I guess you got to be kind of a farmer at heart to like this type of work. It's not, super scientific or anything. It's just a lot of boring work involved in fish hatchery. But I was happy to get into it, and it just happened that when I finished my master's degree at Iowa State, then there was a hatchery manager's position open at a trout hatchery in northeast Iowa, and I was fortunate enough to get that job. And then they offered me the position down here, and I transferred down here. I was pretty fortunate, really.
What did you work on for your master's degree?
Our food habits, growth, and distribution of larval walleye.
Unlike walleye, which can only be stocked in large lakes and reservoirs, channel catfish, which Rathbun Hatchery also raises, are stocked in practically every type of water in Iowa. We'll talk about this popular game fish in a moment. Channel catfish do well in just about every kind of water. Besides being well adapted to a wide variety of water conditions, this species grows fast, it grows large enough to be a superb game fish, and most anglers consider catfish excellent eating. Catfish survive exceptionally well as predators and scavengers in the thousands of farm ponds in Iowa. Folklore has it that catfish will eat just about anything, and in fact research has pretty much shown that they will. There are several bodies of water in the state which are man-made, but they aren't flood control or recreational reservoirs. A lot of these are things like industrial pits, like this gravel pit near Boone. As you can see, this is a constantly changing, very disturbed area, and fish that require a stable, more complex habitat would probably not survive here. But the extremely adaptable channel catfish often does remarkably well in this type of water. Even though farm ponds and industrial pits will support catfish,